Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. We are now live. We have a few problems here today at the peoplesvoice.tv, which have kept us off air, all due to an outside influence, not us at all. We are now on air. Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm Mark Windows. This show brings you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. We will be watching those who are watching us, watching the People's Voice. We will be covering a wide variety of interlinked and fascinating subjects on this and future shows. We want you to be part of the show, so do phone in. Since last week's show on geoengineering and chemtrails, 11% of MPs have now had the directive to ban stratospheric aerosol spraying or geoengineering, aka chemtrails. The website to send the directive straight to your MP is www.chemtrailsprojectuk.com. That's www.chemtrailsprojectuk.com. It's just a click of the mouse, so please do it. Talking of our representatives in Parliament, there has still been no reply from my MP about whether public servants in dereliction of duty who openly mislead members of the public should be sacked. I have all the evidence to present and will keep you posted on that one. Which brings us into today's hugely important subject. The corporations are looting the public. Debt is out of control. The banks are repossessing property on a massive scale. Even student loans from the 90s have been sold off to a debt collection company who remain undisclosed. This is all planned and we are all being stripped of our assets. On top of this, our system of law is broken. Those enforcing and administering the law do not know the basics of their own system. This affects how debts are created and recovered. The fundamental principles of law, such as due process, innocent until proven guilty, have also now been usurped. The courts are a commercial enterprise. The police, courts and the judicial system itself are controlled by corporate interests. We now have summary justice. You can be charged with an offence without having committed the offence. Due process is ignored. You are now assumed guilty until proven innocent. Private corporate interests issue fines, issue a summons, appoint your lawyer, take you to their prison. With corruption now the norm and legislation eroding what few rights are left, what are the answers? Our guest on today's show will throw some light on this and hopefully offer some solutions. Nothing on the show is given as legal advice, but all is based on research, experience and legal documentation. Our first guest on today's show is researcher David Sheen. David has seen the court process in action, observed the corruption and seen the basic rules of law eroded. He has attended court hearings with many people, including myself. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, what got you into this area of research, looking at the law?
Well, actually, looking at your introduction, all of the things that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. I tried to cover all the bases because we've got a lot to cover today. This is going to be a very interesting show. We want you to phone in, ladies and gentlemen. It's 0203 714 2700. Please phone in if you have questions about debt or other problems relating to what we are going to be talking about today. So back to you, David.
Well, the weekend of Michael Jackson's death, I come home to a letter saying that I owed £60,000 to the Child Support Agency, which was...
Which you didn't?
No, absolutely not. My son went to private school, completely paid for, private agreement. So I phoned them up and I was offered the choice of going to prison or all of the things you've...
They offered you a choice?
Yeah, oh yes. I had a guy on the phone saying that if I didn't pay them, that I would have to go to prison. And I mean, I've never had so much as a parking ticket.
But you didn't owe them any money, right?
Absolutely nothing, no. And I had all the proof with it, so I thought, well, OK, you're going to put me in prison for something I didn't do, for a debt that I don't owe. And then I started thinking, how can they put me in prison for a debt? Didn't we abolish debtors' prisons?
Well, actually, they're coming back in America and probably here.
They are back here.
Yeah.
I went on the internet to try and find solutions, and I found Deadbeat Dads Association. Yeah. And what I read there, I didn't like, and I didn't believe. Yeah. I didn't believe any of it. So I researched it.
When you say you didn't believe any of it, can you give us some examples of that?
Well, they, you know, the people would come and, you know, they could take your driving licence. Yeah. No, I don't know what child support was got. Yeah. To do with driving, and this sort of, and your passport, they could remove your passport, and this guy sitting in an office miles away with a computer error said he was going to put me in prison for that computer error.
And this is on an assumption that's not based on any facts whatsoever, right?
No, it was based on basically a phone call that was made in 1993.
Right.
One phone call. And then subsequently, my ex-wife then said, no, look, we've got a private arrangement. But they kept the computer, the taxi running.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we've got a bill of 60. So I was laughing about it. But then once you get someone offering you the choice of going to prison, losing your passport, driving licence, and well, that's fighting talk.
Yeah.
So I thought, and this will this is happening all over the country.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, my son's 25.
Yeah.
So child support
Yeah.
is not really an issue.
Yeah.
And my first question was, show me where you pay the money out.
Yeah. First of all, Pete, I'd just like to say to the viewers this, that many people that I've come across have had trouble with the CSA. If you've had trouble with this child support agency, please do phone in. It's 0203 714 2700. Also, we do need donations. The peoplesvoice.tv will go off air without your help, so please donate. It's better than watching any of the mainstream news channels, as we know. So back to you, Pete.
Yeah, so with that, I started doing investigation into it, as you do. Started to discover that some of what they were saying was actually happening.
Yeah.
Now that really is quite disturbing when you find that a computer can make up a figure,
Yeah.
and you can be put in prison
Yeah.
for it. And this has happened. People have had their houses repossessed. All of what you were saying about the asset grabbing, it's going all over. Then I discovered, well, let's have a look at how they're doing this.
Yeah.
So I went into the courts. Alan Wyndham, who's coming on later, attended one with me. So he's been witness to this. I went into court to fight my case, and got nowhere. And then I found out that there was no judicial process actually taking place in the court, which was a magistrate.
We're talking about an administrative system here, aren't we, David? Because basically, if they're going to take property, it has to be done through equity. In other words, the money has to be proved to have been lost or paid out.
Well, it hasn't been paid out. It's been made up on a computer. But you see, what the Secretary of State has done via a thing called the Farley ruling has taken away the magistrate's court ability to question the CSA's assessments, which is ridiculous because they've been shown that 70% of their calculations are incorrect. Yeah. So why would you create a ruling so that a magistrate who's there to adjudicate cannot adjudicate? And that's what the Farley ruling does, and the CSA know this, and they advertise it. It's not secret. Yeah. They will tell you in the document that there's no point coming to court because you cannot question our calculations. They cannot be questioned. This was done by the Farley ruling. And
I have the ruling here.
You got it there, yeah?
Yeah. It takes away a jurisdiction the court would otherwise have.
So what is a court without jurisdiction?
A place of administration.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're just going there, and what the only thing that the magistrate is there to do is to decide, is there a debt owing? And there is a debt owing because they made it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you the liable person? Yeah. So then you get into that whole system of assumption where they assume that the debt is correct for reasons best known to the state. But obviously you're into a system that has no remedy, no jurisdiction. Yeah. And you talk, when you look at it, and you see that it clearly states there that the court doesn't have any jurisdiction. Yeah. And that is jurisdiction to question the CSA, which is a government body. Yeah. So you've got HMCS, which are a government body. Yeah. You've got CSA, which are a Quango, which is a semi-private, so it's quasi-autonomous government organisation. Yeah. Yeah. Semi and autonomous, quasi meaning...
it crosses.
Semi. Yeah. Autonomous meaning automatic. So they put these words in to confuse you. Quasi, so it's semi-automatic. Now what that means is it's part private. And they drafted in people from industry to run these things and took them out of the scope of the jurisdiction of MPs. So you could write to your MP, and there's nothing you can do. I wrote to my MP, I wrote to Ian Duncan Smith. I never got a reply.
What a surprise, eh?
I got a reply from the CSA. I wrote to Ian Duncan Smith, got a reply from the CSA.
Okay.
And I was complaining about the Farley ruling because, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a court. It's like you say, it's a process. Yeah. It's a processing thing. And the same can be said of the council tax.
Yeah, it's a very similar thing with council tax as well. If anyone's got problems with council tax, this is something that we've covered on our website, landofthefree.co.uk, and it uses the same system of administration. In other words, the council issue the summons and the notice of liability. There is actually no liability order from the court because they're done in bulk hearings, and we've got some very interesting information on that if people want to call in if they've got problems with council tax. But getting back to this administrative problem that you had, you then contacted your MP. You basically ran out of options.
My local MP was very good. He did reply, and he tried to get involved but couldn't, because this has changed, by the way. Yeah. The CSA has now been changed and brought under parliamentary control, which is a good thing. Yeah. But there's still a lot of these things left in the system. Yeah. There's people having their houses taken away. There's people being knocked on by bailiffs for no good reason, really, and no judicial process in the middle.
Yeah.
As such, they think there's a veneer of legality because you think you're walking into a court which you can go in and plead your case, and you can't because of the Farley ruling. Yeah. They don't. Obviously, the Farley ruling only applies to child support issues, and you should support your children, and it's not an issue. That's
not what we're saying on this show, ladies and gentlemen who are watching. The way we're talking about the CSA here has nothing to do with the support of children. This is about looting people, isn't it?
Well, the more you look at it, the bigger the problem grows. Yeah. This is a multi-billion pound debt laundering operation. Yeah. Now, if you think about it, if you've got a court that cannot question the calculations, then the Secretary of State, the Parliament, in making the Farley ruling, have given a Quango, which is a private organisation, an open cheque to write as much debt as it likes.
Absolutely.
So they wrote debts up to, I've heard reports of 4 billion. Yeah. And I mean, it's impossible. Yeah. And one of the other most important things to remember is under the during the Commons Select Committee meeting, Noel Shanahan, admitted that the interim maintenance assessments, these I don't want to bore everyone, but these figures that they made up for you were 300% inflated. Now this, as he said, was used as a bit of a lever. And that is something that's buried in the House of Commons Select Committee report, and you can find it online.
Absolutely. Now that's great information, David. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about solutions, what we can do about this. This administrative system is causing problems for just about everybody in the country, so please phone in on 0203 714 2700. I'm Mark Windows, this is Windows on the World. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Windows on the World with me, Mark Windows. We started a little bit late today. For anyone who's just tuned in, the show today is dealing with debt, liability, the banking system and the courts. Nothing in today's show can be offered as legal advice, but is all based on research, legal documents and first-hand experience. We're going to look at solutions too. The system of debt slavery through financial institutions, the creation of money, etc. is something we will be covering today. Later on in the show, we've got John Witterick from Get Out of Debt Free, who's going to be joining us. In the studio at the moment, we have David Sheen, who is talking about his experiences with the CSA, or Child Support Agency. So, David, you joined a group called the Deadbeat Dads. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, like I say, I didn't believe what was on.
Yeah.
When I spoke to Maurice Barnett, he runs Deadbeat Dads. He explained a lot of the things to me, that there was no remedy in the court, there was no pleading your case, there wasn't anything. But he did say that, look, we can get rid of the bailiffs, because they're not court bailiffs, they're private debt collectors. So showed us how to deal with the bailiffs. Basically, anyone in this situation, you have to put your assets safe, because the government is out to grab them. And as I say, it would all be well and good if it was for child support, but as mentioned before, by their own admission, they're 300% inflated figures a lot of the time. And as I say, their calculations cannot be questioned, even though they're known to be wrong 70% of the time. So you have to protect your assets. Now, you can do that with trusts. You can do that with various different remedies with property.
Just for the viewers out there, trust law is actually not that complicated, and putting your estate into trust is not that difficult, is it, David?
No. I mean, fortunately, I've done a lot of the things Franco Collins recommends on his website. I'd made a will. I'd put my property into trust. So there was nothing because there's nothing for them to grab, because when you put your property into trust, okay, it becomes the property of the beneficiary. So it's no longer your property. It's like having a company car. You can drive it, but it's not your property. So there's remedies in trust, and putting your assets safe. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating anyone doesn't support their children, but what I'm saying is, while this asset grabbing system is in place through these administrative court systems, you have to protect your assets, and you have to do that. The first thing you do is protect your assets. Very, very important. The next thing is to look at remedies. Now, there are remedies built into the system, and one of the most important documents that I've seen is written by a solicitor, Shirley Lewald, and it's on the Land of the Free website. landofthefree.co.uk, and that's when court orders are void. Now, court orders from administrative courts can be voided, and this is a very important thing, isn't it, David? Yeah, because they're administrative capacity. They have limited jurisdiction, and they can be voided. Now, you do need to study on it, but if you look at the Shirley Lewald paper, you'll see that these inferior courts, and our inferior courts, their orders can be voided if there's any discrepancies in the process. So failure of process, frauds. There's three or four different things that can void or make an order voidable. And believe me, the CSA tick all the boxes, because they hardly ever do anything correctly. And there are remedies. We've had a lot of successes now through Deadbeat Dads with voiding orders. And they can be voided. Okay.
But I mean, even before this, you found flaws in the process, because the bailiffs turned up, and his badge was 2 years out of date or something, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't 2 years. It was about 4 weeks.
Oh right, sorry. So this is another case that happened recently. In actual fact, a debt collector turned up with a badge 2 years out of date, and I think that's actually on the internet somewhere. We might refer to that later on.
Well, bailiffs are. I mean, they're useless. I mean, basically they rely on you letting them in. Now, this is the thing that the mainstream media won't tell you. This is, which is great about this platform. Is
Absolutely.
That you can get stuff out there that the mainstream media doesn't want out there. And that is, if you're in peaceful possession of your property and you refuse them entry, they can't just come in. They can't break in. They can climb through an open window. They can walk.
Yes,
through
they
an
have
open
to
door.
have peaceful entry. This is a very important point. Bailiffs have to have peaceful entry. What we're finding, though, is that the police are assisting these bailiffs by breaking people's doors down. Well, the police are there only to keep the peace. That's right, isn't it?
Absolutely, there's a whole paper written on for the police on their powers, and their role is to keep the peace. We've got to stress that you're talking about orders that are written by administrative courts. it does get different when it's High Court bailiffs and so on.
I think this is the misleading thing, because a lot of bailiff paperwork says High Court enforcement, yet they're not actually from the High Court, are they?
No, they're private. Private firms of debt collectors.
They're working as basically debt collectors. That's what people need to get their heads around, the fact that these people are just working in the private capacity. They usually have no proper court authority, and that's very, very important.
Yes, and again, you don't have to let them in.
Yeah.
You can turn them away. You don't have to photograph them like some people have. And the chap who came to me, his card was out of date, so he was levying without a licence. He had a van full of goods.
Which is theft. Right?
So he'd been out thieving all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is how deep the corruption goes. Is we checked the court records to see if he was registered as a bailiff, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after I put in the complaint to everybody, his name suddenly appeared backdated on the computer website. Now, I wish I'd taken a screenshot. I didn't. But that happened. I mean, you can believe me or not believe me. It's up to you. But this guy was levying without a licence. His card had expired. And the facts are there. And I've got an unrebutted affidavit from my wife that he came to the door with an expired. Yeah. Now, they actually wrote to us and said that his licence was carrying on. So he was the only bailiff with a 14-month or the 20. I think it issued for 2 years, but
it's 2 years.
It's 2 years. Yeah. So he was the only bailiff with an extended licence. So I mean, it's rubbish and it's just lies. But this is what they do, and they all cover each other's tracks, and it is fraud, and fraud is part of the system. Yeah. When you look at the remedies in the system, the writs that the higher courts impose on the lower courts is a writ called certiorari, and it lists the different levels of frauds. Yeah. And fraud is just a dirty word in the public, but it's a way of life in the administrative system, and there's all different levels. There's accidental frauds. This
is a very interesting point as well, because I've been into court and you've been into court, and one thing that they never mention is the F word, fraud. The judge will never mention the fraud because it's potentially quite serious, isn't it? Well,
it can be, but the thing to remember is that they've got all these different levels of fraud, and there's range. And if you read, I've got a book on administrative law, which says if the level of fraud is minor or blah blah blah, and like I say, there's these accidental frauds can occur accidentally, and that's what they claim most of the time. But there's a lot of accidents, so you can void the order. It can be voided by a writ. And that's where we've been having success in voiding these orders. There's a lot of remedies built in, although there's been a lot of noise about free man stuff. That stuff doesn't work because you're trying to say common law arguments and law into an administrative system that doesn't really... I mean, I've been into court and claimed my unalienable rights, and I've asked judges for their oath of office, and the judges say it's neither here nor there. And how can your oath of office be neither here nor there? And that's what the judge said to me. Magistrate, sorry. Stipendiary. Magistrate, which are basically solicitors who've sworn the oath.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? I mean, a few years ago, we all tried this stuff in court, and it's a lot of fun. It's great theatre. For instance, when the magistrates ask you to stand and you don't stand, and you stay sitting down, it means that they can't sit down, so they have to leave the room. This is the way the courts work. It's on very occult, deep principles. Now, this is all very amusing, and you can also say, well, I'm the highest authority in this court because the magistrates have left the bench, and I dismiss the case. However, it doesn't work, does it? Because it's just a place of administration.
Yeah, but it's just but see, even the magistrates don't know what's going on. I mean, they're just there to sign an order. But they're going in there with this standing up and sitting down business and try. The only thing you can do when you walk into administrative court is incriminate yourself, really.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't advise anyone to go in and try any of this free man stuff, because I've done it. And
we've all tried this,
it doesn't work.
Viewers, and it's very interesting. I mean, there's certain principles of it that really do and should work. However, the practice of it with the administrative system which we live under, which is Roman, it doesn't even need to hear it. If you turn up in that court and you say, I'm not the person, well, they're going to say, well, what are you doing here? We need the person. We're only here to administer against this estate. That's right, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. What interest have you in the estate if you're not the liable person?
Yeah.
Why are you there? You're only there if you've got an interest in it, if you're the liable person. So as far as they're concerned, if you turn up on the day, you can say, I claim my unalienable rights, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't wash.
Yeah, but this is also very interesting about having legal representation, isn't it? Because if you go in with legal representation, you're classed as an imbecile.
Absolutely.
But if you can go and administer your own estate, if you can walk into that court and administer your own estate, and the people who are trying to administer it for you, whether it be the council or CSA, are in error, and you can prove that you're the person who can administer it correctly, then things can change, can't they?
Oh yeah. I mean, the other thing is you've now got these private firms sanctioning arrest warrants.
Yeah.
Now that is scary.
Well, this is very interesting because I've actually seen a summons from G4. G4 are actually issuing their own summons saying that they've come from Crown Court. So this complete corporatisation of the whole system is where it's getting frightening, because there's private corporations who are doing a massive property grab.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing properties. I've seen properties taken on the back of these inflated figures from the CSA, and I've seen some things that I can't really discuss independent cases, but I've seen houses taken where the father of a child has remarried, or not, he hadn't remarried, he'd gone into a property and put himself on the mortgage, and the lady that he'd shacked up with or become involved with, because he was on the mortgage, they repossessed her house and threw her child out.
This was a case that you told me about. It's
Yes.
Absolutely unbelievable. So they're not even going for the estate of the liable person, which they've made liable through an assumption. They're going for the partner of the person.
Now,
right?
they're actually making children homeless.
Yeah.
and her own solicitor pleaded her case that, you know, why should this child be, and bear again, there's another case like mine where the child has grown up.
Yeah.
So it's basically grabbing money for the Secretary of State, and they're throwing children and people out on the street who have had nothing to do with it, purely because of that legal tie between the property.
Now,
and that is outrageous.
Yeah. After the break, we're going to bring on John Witterick from Get Out of Debt Free. But this is very important that student loans have been sold off. So student loans from the 90s have been sold off to a private debt collector. Now, all those people who've got a job, who didn't pay their student loan in the 90s, are going to find that they may have private debt collectors going after their property, which is very serious.
You'll have everything we've just spoken about, all those people, the student loans, the debt book has been sold. All of what we've talked about is coming your way.
Absolutely. We'll be back after the break. This is Windows on the World. I'm talking to David Sheen. Please phone in. It's 0203 714 2700. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back to Windows on the World with me, Mark Windows. For anyone who's just tuned in today, we're talking about how to deal with debt, liability, the banking system and the courts. Nothing in today's show can be offered as legal advice, but it's all based on research, legal documents and first-hand experience. We're going to look at solutions too. The system of debt slavery through financial institutions and the creation of money as debt is something our next guest is familiar with. John Witterick is founder of the Get Out of Debt Free website, which gives information about the global financial system and offers solutions to those who are experiencing financial hardship. The site now has a lively community of over 40,000 members across 7 countries. John, welcome to Windows on the World.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having us.
Great. So tell us a bit about your site, Get Out of Debt Free.
Right, well, I set it up a few years ago, almost by accident. It was one of these things where I never actually decided to set up a sort of a debt site. It was just that I was in debt myself, and I used to get phone calls from the
Who were you in debt to, John?
Well, yeah, I thought I was in debt to a whole load of banks, but I actually did a little bit of research and looked a little bit deeper into it, but I'll go into that in a moment. But initially what was happening, I was getting phone calls from debt collectors, and as soon as that happened, I started getting really nervous, and my voice would go all shaky, and I started having to look what was going on. And so I'd looked at a lot of things in my life where I was very confident, and suddenly my power was being taken away by these debt collectors. So I started reading up on all different sort of aspects of debt. And I started in the old days of Nexus magazine. And I started realising the banks created money out of thin air, which I thought was a little bit strange. Then I came across, the big one for me was coming across a book by Mary Elizabeth Croft, which was an e-book, which is still available online, and we have links to it on the website, which was how I
clobbered every financial institution in the world. With a little bit more.
With a little bit more, that's the one. Yeah. So,
if you put that into Google, How I Clobbered Every Financial Institution by Mary Croft, it will come up. It's got a rather longer title than that, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's basically a spiritual economics guide. So what it was doing, I was waking up to a lot of stuff, and I was started doing meditation and stuff like that. So I was waking up to a lot of new ideas in my life. And then suddenly I come across this book, and it made an awful lot of sense to me. And what she did, she came up with these ideas of template letters where she started challenging the banks, saying, well, look, have we got a valid contract? Have we got this? Have we got that? And so what I did, I thought, fantastic, my problems are over. I'll get onto Google, because it was, it was before YouTube. It was a good sort of 10 years ago, this was. But I actually looked for the template letters. So I Googled Mary Elizabeth Croft template letters, nothing came up. There wasn't anything, and she didn't actually put the letters up. So what I had to do is reread the book, take a few notes, and actually create the letters. And I started sending these letters off to the debt collectors, and I couldn't believe how quickly they gave up. And so it was and also something within me changed, because once I realised that the whole thing was a scam, that the debt collectors buy the debt off the banks for about 10p in the pound or less, that's less than 10 cents in the dollar, you realise the whole thing's a scam. Yeah. So when you feel empowered, it's almost like your self-worth comes back, and there's nothing to be ashamed about.
I think that's a very important point, John, and to everybody listening out there or watching, this fear factor is really what drives this financial looting of people. For instance, debt collectors have no power. The power of debt collectors and bailiffs is pretty much in the mind of the person who's receiving the letters. We're going to remove your goods. They even say they can put you in prison. I mean, they can do none of these things without your consent, and that's very important. Private debt collectors, though, even apart from bailiff companies have slightly more powers, but private debt collectors who just purchase debt or receivables can only ask you to pay and get you into a contract. That's right, isn't it, John?
That's correct, yes, yeah. Mark, yes. What I did after that, once I'd actually got these template letters and realised that they were working, and I realised the shift in myself as well, because I'd gone from being very scared of these people to sort of like suddenly, because they used to phone me up and I used to sort of shake, but then I started doing tricks like asking them security questions and actually having a laugh with them. So rather than being intimidated or get into conversations with them, I ask them, if they know what they're doing, if they know that their companies are actually buying their debts, because you actually have an opportunity to actually educate them. Or sometimes I just put the phone next to Radio 3 and just give them music. I say, okay, can you just hold a moment?
Yeah, this is a really good one.
And then go back a few minutes later, just say, oh, just one moment, and go back. Yeah,
yeah, well, it's what I do is if anyone like that phones up, I say, hello, accounts. And they'll ask for me, I said, hello, you're through to accounts. Can I have your account number, your name, and the first line of your address, please? Yes. Which is what they phoned up to ask you, basically. And they say, we haven't got an account with you. I said, well, why are you phoning accounts then? You don't really hear from them again after that, do you? But this is the fun side of it, but there is a much more serious side, what David's been talking about with the actual looting of assets.
Yes.
I mean, debt collectors are quite easy to get rid of in the main.
Yes.
But there's something that a lot of them are doing now, John. I don't know whether you're aware of this, you probably are, but they're now stating that they're going to go to county court. And what they do is their debt collection companies now employ one legally qualified person, so they have one solicitor, and they will then say that we are solicitors acting for the company, and then they can instigate county court proceedings. Have you had any experience of this?
Well, one of the things, we actually ask for a number of things. If I just refer to my notes a minute, we always ask for an invoice. We ask for it in our name, not the sort of straw man name, which I think you're going to be going on to. And we ask for a proof of a lawful contract. And the important thing with debt collectors, we now ask for the deed of assignment. Not a notice of assignment, the deed of assignment. Now that's something that will stand up in court. So, and we've actually had about 25, just in the last few weeks, we've had about 25 set-asides where people have actually...
Is this for just credit card debt? Or?
This is generally, on get out of debt free, we tend to be focusing on credit card, loans, that sort of debt. Although, there are guys on there that cover council tax and stuff like that, the site really is geared towards consumer debt initially.
That's very different. Council tax is different in that there is a fiduciary duty of the person to pay the council tax, which goes back to the poor laws, which is quite an interesting thing because during the time of Henry VIII, the poor laws were massively extended, and there was a thing called a certificate of settlement, which became the birth certificate, passport and national insurance number. So all those things started off with a thing called a certificate of settlement, and it meant that you were a ward of your parish. The parish council had a duty to you, you had a duty to them. This is where this council tax comes in. It's slightly different. A lot of people will quote the 1992 Local Government Finance Act, which is a statute. However, with council tax, it goes a lot deeper, as our research showed. This is why you can be imprisoned for council tax, but usually that's only if you agree to it. And that's something that's very important, isn't it, David?
Yes. One of the things I'd like to pick up on, what you were saying about the county court, what you'll find with a lot of these debt collection companies that are buying debts, as you say, 10p in the pound, they often send in a paralegal. Now, if you get a paralegal sitting in the creditor's chair, who's not the true and lawful owner of that debt, you can object. You can object to a paralegal even being there. Because
I had a recent experience of this with an insurance company, and they were representing me, but they had someone who wasn't legally qualified. I recorded the phone call, and it's very interesting to see their reaction when you say that. You'll very quickly get a phone call from someone who is legally qualified, who's automatically, magically representing you. Well, it weren't 3 days ago. So what you can do then is dismiss them from your case, because a lot of this with insurance is about putting your premiums up. We may get onto that on a future show or even later on this show, but that's very important because this operation of taking as much as corporations can from you, including your property, is going on a massive scale. And I'd just like to bring in now the issue of student debt, and the student debts have been sold to a third-party debt collector. This was on mainstream news. So it means all of those people who took out student loans and couldn't pay them back and may now have jobs, if they're very lucky, are about to have their property and assets looted. And that's a very important point, isn't it, David?
It's scary. I mean, it's bigger in America. The student loan crisis is going to be bigger than the subprime mortgage fiasco. That's a bombshell waiting to happen, and that could sink a lot of things, the dollar, everything, and this debt is being used as a weapon. And as you know, money is created out of thin air.
Totally.
Quantitative easing and fractional reserve lending. Okay, so they're making this, like the same as the CSA are just making up debt with a computer and a pen. This money is being created often off the back of your assets. Or you're being sold. George Osborne has issued 100-year bonds. Now that hasn't happened since the South Sea bubble. Now that means you've been via the birth certificate, you're yourself, your children, and your children's children have been sold into bondage.
Yes, absolutely. This is a very, very important thing, because the acceptance of the birth certificate means that you're a registered person within the system and you are traded upon as a financial future. This is why you are a liable person, because you accepted the birth certificate. If you're registered to the state, then you are chattel goods of the state. And this goes as far, if people don't understand that, your car is in trust to the DVLA. You signed a V5 document which gave title of the vehicle to the DVLA. You merely have use of it, because on your V5 document, you will be the registered keeper and not the owner, which is why the DVLA can take the car off you if you don't pay their taxes. And it's the same with the liability of the person, which is basically through the birth certificate, and we're all traded as financial futures of this country. Can you expand on that a bit, Pete?
Well, only in as much as people would understand the government bonds that are sold on the money markets. They're basically against your future tax revenue.
Yeah.
So your futures have been sold, as you've rightly said. It all started with David Bowie.
Did it really? I can't believe that, can you?
Apparently. I'm not blaming David for any of this, of course, but he sold his future sales of his records and to have the money now.
Yeah.
And basically what the governments are doing for you is they're selling your futures, future tax revenue to create the quantitative easing on the bond, the government bond gilt market. That's basically what's happening.
Can I just give us because what I like to do, I like to have very, very simple models to understand everything, because I've got a fairly low IQ, as you've probably realised. But the idea... No, you're supposed to say, no,
John, we just got drunk together. That's not quite the same thing as IQ.
You've got lovely eyes, though.
I think the whole thing with this fictional entity, we've got to understand that, when I started looking at the game of Monopoly and the current financial, the whole current financial system, is that you realise in the game of Monopoly, you don't actually get on the board and play it yourself. You have a little token, and this is where the fictional straw man or this fictional entity comes in, because it's not actually you that they're addressing. It's the Mr. or it's your name in capital letters.
It's a legal title.
It's a legal title.
And this again goes back to the poor laws, especially with council tax. I mean, the thing is that you can go into court and say, I am not the legal title. Well, as we said earlier, what are you doing here? The thing is that the way money's created and on the back of financial futures is something that people really need to know about, because then it gives you a different perspective on how you see yourself within the system. Isn't that right, John?
Yes, yes, certainly. And we're just picking up on what you said earlier about banks creating money out of thin air. Not only do they do it, but they actually don't even keep it a secret, because I found a few quotes, from some of the top bankers. We got Mervyn King, Sir Mervyn King, as he is. He's now the ex-governor of the Bank of England. But he actually says, when banks extend loans to their customers, they create money by crediting their customers' accounts. So he's actually saying that they create money. So it's not even... But however, we think we're getting loans, don't we? Yeah. But how can we... And the idea that we're borrowing other people's savings is complete rubbish.
Yeah, it's illegal.
Totally.
Well, this is a very interesting point.
They sort of peddle this point. Yeah. Well, you should, I feel like I've got a few videos to do. It's like where I phone up the advertising standards and actually say, well, look, my bank is actually offering loans, but I know they haven't got any money because they basically said as much.
Yeah.
So how is it they can loan something they haven't got?
So it wasn't there in the first place.
That wasn't there in the first place. And there's so many. And just one more quote I'm going to do. This was Lord Adair Turner, Chief of the FSA, Financial Services Authority.
Which is now the Financial Conduct Authority.
It is, yes. Yeah, they had to change that, didn't they?
Well, they had to change it because the FSA did have some power.
Yes.
They could actually fine people, but the Financial Conduct Authority is just It's a fancy website.
Totally.
Have you seen it?
Totally. I haven't yet. No,
Yeah.
no.
There's also the Prudential Authority, so it's two of them, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah, it's gone to two now.
No, it's naughty. But, you know, Lord Adair Turner actually says the financial crisis of 2007-2008 occurred because we failed to constrain private financial systems' creation of private credit and money. So they're talking about that the current financial system was caused by creating money out of thin air, and that they've admitted as much. Now, when Cameron goes on the television and actually, this is our Prime Minister Cameron, actually goes on the telly and actually says, we need austerity, we've got to balance the books. The books can never ever be balanced because the debt always outweighs, the money supply. So there's not enough money in circulation. If we tried to pay off the current UK debt, which stands at about 1.4 trillion, okay, and that's just as it is. That's without pensions and things. It's, you know, when you add up everything, it's around 5 trillion. But that actually outstrips the current monetary supply. So we'd run out of money long before we paid the debt off. So it's completely crazy.
Absolutely. Money's created out of thin air. Please phone in 0203 714 2700. This is Windows on the World. We're waiting for your calls. We did start a bit late today from circumstances beyond our control. We started at 12 instead of 11, so I hope some of you are tuning in now. But I have a quote here, John. Got one for you.
Thank you.
It's Sir William Petty wrote in 1682, "What remedy is there if we have too little money? We must erect a bank which, well computed, doth almost double the effect of our coined money." Stated it there.
Yes, totally.
"And we have in England materials for a bank which shall furnish stock enough to drive the trade of the whole commercial world."
Yes.
Well, he only learned it from the Knights Templars.
Totally,
right?
totally. Well, just going back in the history books, and this is something that I came across almost by accident. Well, it was by accident. I come from the Channel Island of Guernsey, and came across this thing called the Guernsey experiment. And what it was back after the Napoleonic War, where, like after most wars, you tend to find that governments run out of money because wars tend to be very, very expensive, and so governments have to borrow money from private banks, you see. So the government in Guernsey were pretty sharp, you know, even though they're probably part-time, you know, officials working on behalf of the people. What they decided is if they couldn't borrow any more money off the private banks, what they would do is actually create their own currency, which they did. And rather than just extend the money supply, what they did, they created these are government Guernsey promissory notes that would just last 2 years, because they had labour, they had loads of granite, because the island was made out of granite, but they couldn't build anything because they didn't have any money to pay anyone. So what they did, they created this debt-free currency, which after a couple of years was then taken back, by which time they had a thriving economy because everyone was able to trade with each other once that money was taken back out. So the only thing that actually stopped it was the private banks actually got onto the Privy Council, and the Privy Council basically got onto our bailiff, which is a Queen's representative, and stopped the government doing it. Yeah. Because it was very much like the Bradbury pound as well. It's the government can create debt-free money on our behalf. Yeah. So why doesn't it? Why have we got to pay interest on the debt? And we're actually paying more in interest on the current debt than we are completely on education.
Well, the government's run by private institutions and banks, basically. That's what we know.
Of course it is. I realise you know this, but I'm sure a lot of people aren't aware of this.
And if you are aware of this or you're not aware of it, please phone in 0203 714 2700. This is Mark Windows on the World, with John Witterick in the studio today and David Sheen. Now, David and John, maybe we can talk about some kind of remedies within the system, especially you, David, at the moment, because you were hit with a massive bill from the CSA. Yep. You looked at solutions, and in your solution was trust law, wasn't it?
Yeah. Again, this is putting your assets safe, taking them out of the estate that they're in, which is being attacked by the state.
So you're taking them out of the public and putting them into the private, is
Absolutely,
that right?
I mean, we've got to remember is statutes are instruments devised to remove equity.
Yes.
And that's what they do, whether it's child support or traffic fines, anything like that.
Yeah.
But again, there are remedies built within the system, and I think the most important document that's out there at the moment is the Shirley Lewald, which explains...
Which we referred to before.
Yeah, but you have to understand the difference between avoidable order and a void order.
Yes.
A void order is if I ask you to kill someone for me and I'll give you £500 and I say I'll give you the rest when it's done, and you don't do it. You can't sue me for the balance because it was an illegal, unlawful.
Yes, it was unlawful in the first place.
Yeah. Now, voidable orders are orders from public bodies. Now, you've got to remember these public bodies like the councils and the Child Support Agency are issuing their own summonses by tacit agreement with the court, and then they shouldn't be doing that.
That's right.
If you look
under Halsby's Laws of England, and we're going to come back to that after the break. So this is Windows on the World. We'll see you after the break. Please phone in. Welcome back to Windows on the World. Our next guest on the show is researcher and musician Alan Bariffi. Alan's been looking into the system of law and how we may find solutions. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark.
So you started off as a musician, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I still do that occasionally now, for my sins.
Well, that's the thing. I think we all started off, we were enjoying our lives, and then this got in the way. So now we've spent some time dealing with it. Now, we met several years ago, didn't we? And a very interesting court case, which was down in Wales.
Indeed, yeah.
So could just run that by us. What happened?
Well, I was invited by the gentleman we know, Raymond Sinclair, to attend a court hearing on council tax.
Yes.
And we wanted to... There were a number of theories at the time about how the courts were working. We didn't really know much stuff in those days.
We all kind of learned together, didn't we, in a way? Yeah.
And we thought, well, we've got these theories, let's put them into practice, really.
We've got these theories, and let's put them into practice after our caller. So we've got a caller on the line. Who have we got on the line? We've got a caller waiting. We've got a caller waiting. Can we have caller, please? Hello, caller. Are you there?
Hi, yeah, this is Phil.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to turn the monitor up a bit so we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay. So what's your name?
Phil.
Phil. And where are you calling from, Phil?
Sorry?
Where are you calling from, Phil?
Devon, UK.
Okay.
Yeah, just been sat watching this program, and it's like describing my life. It's incredible. I'm currently in a process of battling the bankrupt Bank of Ireland for my interest-free only mortgage, which they're fighting tooth and nail to take the house off me. I'm also just been looking at the Get Out of Debt Free website, and I'm about to take on some of my creditors. I did a consolidating sort of practice a while ago with one of these debt management companies, but they were actually charging me so much it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
so,
we'll consolidate all your debts into one, and we'll take some money as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the admin costs we're getting ridiculous. The crazy thing about this is I have a law degree, and I've gone into some hard times lately, and it's not easy getting work in this neck of the woods in this particular area. But when I was listening to you guys, I wanted to just bring in something which may amaze you or may not, and there's a little bit of an immigration angle which I would like to just raise here. Is my wife's from outside the EU, and she came in on a visa, 2-year spouse visa, which that's a whole different story. Had to go to the other country to appeal because it was refused, but that's another program. But on her visa, it said no redress to public funds. Now, that means she cannot claim any benefits, but it also means if I claim benefits, including council tax rebate, or even if I was unemployed, my interest on my mortgage would be paid. Bear in mind it's interest only, that's a lot of money. If I was to claim any of those benefits, they would revoke her visa. In other words, I'd lose my wife. And how draconian is that? I don't know. But, I'm currently in a situation where, every direction I turn, I seem to be hitting a brick wall. I just wondered if any of your panel would like to comment on that, or if there's any advice they could give me.
Well, Alan, is there any advice you could give our caller?
Well, I don't like to give out advice.
Well, we can't give out legal
per se,
advice,
but
we can give out our experiences.
That's the first thing. It's interesting you mentioned that you have a law degree. When I first started getting into this whole process, I was saying to Mark, I realised quite soon that the whole concept of law was deliberately made to be confusing.
Oh, yeah.
It's all compartmentalised, and one of the difficult things is trying to simplify the processes we need to do to find remedy, which is
they don't want
what
that.
it is. Yeah. And that's what, I mean, you're doing on Get Out of Debt Free. Well, you're probably better to respond to this gentleman than I am, you know.
Yeah, but I really don't. I can't see a sort of simple. I think I'd have to look into it to sort of.
I think
it's a complex question
as well.
On immigration and sort of looking at the debt issue. I mean, one of the problems, and I'll just emphasise this because you mentioned it earlier, is when you get bombarded with these phone calls and these letters and even a fake county court summons. Which I've looked at recently from one of these agencies.
So can you tell? So a debt collector sent you a fake summons? Is that what you're saying?
It looks like a fake summons. It's basically saying, you know, you're going to be summoned to court. But
you're going to be summoned. No, that's pre-court action, though, isn't it?
So, but it was provided in the template of a legal document. Now I've done enough drafting of legal documents to know when they're doing this to threaten the hell out of someone and to make them respond. Yeah. So in itself, you know, but you know, when you're getting all these calls and all these demands, what tends to happen, or it's happened in my case, I'm dyslexic, I shut down. You go into this sort of area where you think, I just can't cope with this anymore.
This is what it's meant to do, and it's meant to paralyse you with fear. And the mental conquest of this stuff is the biggest one anyone can face. And I think all the people in the room would agree with me here. Because once you realise that this is really a game that's being played, you have to let go of everything, including property. But the worrying thing now is that people are getting their houses taken from them over trifles, which should not be happening. There are things that should only be heard in equity, which are going to private companies. Private companies are running the whole of the debt collection business, and they're basically making up their own fees and acting as they want, really. But we've had tremendous success fighting them because most of their paperwork, in fact, I would say, a lot of things that are written on the documentation is actually incorrect. Yeah.
But I mean, I'd love to talk to you guys off air and get some more direction. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. But an example. I mean, with my own building society, I was facing a repossession order, and I phoned up to negotiate. I'd already had an order. It was set aside.
So are you paying your mortgage? So have you defaulted on the mortgage? Is that
I defaulted on the mortgage, yeah. It was basically the reason I defaulted, it was interest only, and it was very manageable about 5 years ago, and it's doubled. Yeah. They've just doubled the interest ridiculously from a manageable figure to double, and I'm struggling to do it. I've defaulted, and I had it set aside. I set an arrangement in place. That arrangement went by the way.
So that was an arrangement with the building society?
Yeah, okay. And through the court. But then they got judgment and they set it aside. And this is one of the most dangerous points. When you've got judgment set aside, they can repropossess your property within like 30 days.
Yeah. Would you like to come in on this date?
Now, if I... one of the things was when I tried to negotiate with them and said, look, I can start making some payments. He said, no. I said, I can make a payment, pay the arrears. They didn't want the arrears. They didn't want the arrears from the arrangement. They wanted half of the total arrears that I'd run up.
Can I
ask
you a
David,
question? Is that an interest rate swap, default swap arrangement that you had in the contract? No, it was interest only from the beginning. Yeah, but you say that the amount's doubled. Have they sort of doubled the interest on it because you've defaulted or something?
No. What was fascinating with this is I was with one building society. I don't know if I should mention who they were, but then...
No, don't do that.
No, they went over. I suddenly had another one come in. Said, "Oh, we've taken on this mortgage now," and
Right.
during that time, the interest rates went up.
Ah, right. Well, you need to look, like I said before, look at the Land of the Free website. Look at the Shirley Leewald. She's
I'm about to, yeah.
solicitor about the void orders, because there might be a possibility that you can void that order. Now, this is what we were saying about companies coming in buying debts. Now, it's a similar thing with credit card companies. When you go for an unsecured loan, and then all of a sudden this third-party interloper comes in, buys the debt for 10 pence.
Yeah, well, this is like someone has actually bought another.
Yeah, but have they?
Mortgage.
They need to have the deed of assignment.
Yes. Yeah.
They must
not the notice, the deed.
Not the notice. They must have the deed of assignment. But you need to get acting on this pretty quick. Listen, I've been through it. I know what you're going through. I was hit with a 60 grand debt which I didn't owe, and threats of prison and confiscation of everything. And you've got to stand strong. There's people out there who will help you. And there's websites out there that you can get help, and don't despair. And I know there's no real help from the mainstream. The solicitors are useless. These debt agencies are useless, but there are people out there that will help you.
Okay.
All right. Go to Land of the Free. Get in touch. You can even, if you want, go to the Deadbeat Dads Association. Look it up. Deadbeat Dads Association.
Yep, got that written down.
Yep. Get on to Deadbeat Dads. Say you've spoken to David Sheen. Explain your problem, because the people there have gained experience with house repossessions and the like. And with your law degree, that will help you. But the depression that you're going through, I can hear it in your voice. This is all caused by the state. Now, they're causing injury to the people. And it's not just the state, it's the banks.
Yeah.
The state are allowing it to happen.
Well, this is the ridiculous thing. I've got high blood pressure to begin with. I feel like I'm just stood there with my back against a torrent of water. And the moment I walk away from that door, the whole lot's going to come tumbling down.
You're not alone, mate.
We're all going through the same thing. I think that a huge number of the population of this country are going through this at the moment, and it's actually being done, I believe, on the back of Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, which is a property grab worldwide of all assets of all people. And this is extremely serious. We must fight it any way we can. So, Alan, we went into court a few years ago, and we had quite an interesting day, didn't we?
We did indeed. We were testing out some theories, and in order to help people, we needed to test how watertight they were. So there were quite a few of us went there. We were all interested, and it was council tax liability.
It was, yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And apparently it was filmed. And that's it's called Councils, Courts and Conmen.
Yeah, someone uploaded it to the internet. Yeah,
that's uploaded, and it's had a lot of people. But it basically proved to us what we now know, but we didn't then. Yeah. It's an administrative process. The presumption is you were guilty. Even before the case even started, the liability order was written. In other words, you were guilty before the whole process started.
This is quite an interesting case, and I wonder if this would happen again now, because the police were called to the court, and they ran in with tasers. They ran in. There's a few of us sitting in a public gallery on a very cold day in January, wasn't it?
It was
we
indeed,
were sat there sort of in the public gallery, and the police ran in, sweating with tasers, and one of the constables was acted completely as a constable, didn't he? Whereas the sergeant sided with the court. So there was this crazy standoff, and it was very interesting, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, when the constables came in, and I think it was Ray St Clair, he put them on their oath, because PC stands for Police Constable. They are, in fact, two entities. They're policy enforcement officers, or more these days, revenue collectors, or they're constables, which is an ancient right, really, and they swear an oath to be a constable, and they're peace officers. They're there to keep the peace.
This is very interesting as well, because there's on landofthefree.co.uk there's something called the 9 Principles of Policing, and it's worth carrying that round with you when you stop by the police, because in future shows we are actually going to be talking about this, how to interact with the police who become more corporate and indeed have been taken over by corporate interests. For instance, Surrey Police were going to be taken over by Kellogg, Brown and Root, which is Halliburton. Now, if there's anyone out there in Surrey and knows about this, could they phone in? Because I'd like to know whether, in fact, Surrey Police have been privatised and taken over by Halliburton, which is Kellogg, Brown and Root. So, yes, getting back to your experience and my experience, Alan.
Well, in the court, as the police constables came in, they could have removed Raymond Sinclair. He was causing a controversy, but he put them on their oaths. And quite rightly, they honoured their oaths. They ceased to become policy enforcement officers for a corporation, and they became peace officers. They were there to prevent a breach of the peace. However, the sergeant, who I recognise was not local, the court was in Wales, and the sergeant had a Northern Irish accent as well, and his relationship with his colleagues seemed to be somewhat strained. I think that was the impression I got. He wasn't prepared to offer his oath at all, which technically is
another
perjury,
thing he
isn't
said
it?
was, if I remember rightly, was he said, if you've got a grievance with the court, take it up with the Law Society. He kept reiterating,
right. Well,
take it up with you've got a grievance with the court, then take it up with the Law Society.
Exactly, but I mean, technically that's very spurious, really, because the Law Society represents the private bar guild, which was operating there. And what Raymond Sinclair had done is he'd put the constables on their oath, which is common law of the land. So we've got two different stages of law there. His men had followed one protocol, if you like, and he was ignoring that, which technically he was not honouring the oath he swore to His Majesty the Queen, which is perjury, and he was attempting to commit a fraud as well, technically.
But the interesting thing was, we all waited to go into court, which is, if you want your case to be heard at the council tax hearing, which is a bulk hearing, you wait hours to go in to see the magistrates. So we waited hours to go in, and they convened it in a proper court with a glass cage in the middle, the dock, and we all trundled in there with these local people. And it looked like a court. There was a clerk there trying to get jurisdiction. We wouldn't stand up, so they couldn't sit down. It was a complete farce, but it was extremely funny. But the point that we realised about this was that it wasn't a court at all, because the liability had been issued 2 hours before the case. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. It was basically, looking back, it was a complete charade. It was a pantomime. It was basically going through the process, and you've already presumed guilt, and the liability order sentencing had been done. So
this was a very interesting thing we found out, because it took us into the areas of research we're into now, in that it is an administrative system, and what we started looking at was why it's an administrative system. And this really is very important for anybody who's following the freeman route, because you need to learn where these different jurisdictions are. For instance, council tax, you cannot apply a freeman argument to council tax, because you have a fiduciary duty to pay council tax, because it goes back to the poor laws, as I was saying earlier on. And this is where there's a brilliant researcher called Franco Collins, who has a website called Ucadia, U-C-A-D-I-A, Ucadia. And he does a weekly podcast. And his knowledge of the Roman system which we're under is second to none, in my opinion. I think his work is absolutely brilliant, and it leads you down to the roads of what this is really about the way that we've been set up as chattel goods of the state. And this is what we're all suffering from now. And if we can take back our power in any way we can, it would be through knowledge of this. That knowledge is empowerment, isn't it, David?
Absolutely. It's the only way that you can find any remedy in the system is by empowering yourself. You won't get it from a solicitor. The thing we discovered with the going to prison thing for non-payment of child support was that they've created this whole new jurisdiction called quasi-criminal.
Yes.
Now, that is how they were getting people into prison on a civil matter.
Yeah.
It's a quasi-criminal.
Well,
charge.
civil and criminal have crossed over, and the police should not be doing this. And they are. They're actually taking people's vehicles at the side of the road for private debt collectors, and they should not be doing this. The police are there to look for uninsured drivers and unsafe vehicles. However, they've crossed over. Again, that's an example of it, right?
Yeah,
Now,
well, they're collecting money.
yeah, we're going to go to our next caller, George in Yorkshire. George, are you there? George in Yorkshire.
Hello there, Mark.
Welcome to Windows on the World.
Well, thank you. How are you all?
We're great. We started a bit late today through technical problems, which were not the fault of the People's Voice. We're doing everything we can to stay on air. And we're so glad that you've joined us. So what would you like to say to us today, George?
Thank you. May I just say that it shows the importance of the nature of the information you're sharing, that you had such trouble getting on air, and I'm glad you have. But I just wanted to touch on the esoteric system that really the court process is, to the level that we're dealing with some very Masonic, symbolic kind of system that's in place, that's really sort of almost fooling you, luring you into what is a building that is set up like a Masonic temple. And for instance, you've got the judge who climbs up 3 steps, symbolising the 3 blue degrees of Freemasonry.
The bench is on 3 tiers as well, yeah.
Yeah, and when he's up there, he's basically giving the plaintiff and the defendant a 3rd degree, you know, which is where we get that sort of term, you know, for grilling somebody from. But there's numerous other sort of different things about a courtroom that are very esoteric, and certainly a researcher, Jordan Maxwell, is well worth looking into for that.
Absolutely.
But it's totally fooling the people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. As Jordan says, what do you play on? What do you play on a court? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you play tennis with? A racket. Yeah,
that's right. It's a very religious sort of thing that's going on there. And it was a couple of months ago, the system actually, they tried to overturn the fact that people currently have to swear an oath on a biblical text, you know, before they speak. But basically, that's been ruled that the books have to stay. So, you know, whether you like it or not, you've basically got to swear an oath to an entity, which is, so researchers say, is Saturn. So it's sort of...
the cult of Saturn is something we will be covering in future weeks. It's a very interesting point you've brought up there, George, because if you go into the City of London and you look at the doors of banks, they'll often have an octagonal handle, and the 8 is the symbol of Saturn. This is very, very interesting esoteric stuff, which I find fascinating, and I know you do too, George, otherwise you wouldn't have phoned in. But the other thing about a judge is his highest role is as a priest. He's there in an ecclesiastical position, and he's there to give remedy. And this is where the occult nature of what goes on in the court becomes very interesting. With these administrative courts, however, all this has been stripped away. And even though this is an ancient thing, I mean, we're talking about going back to really the days of the Knights Templar with a lot of this stuff, and especially the monetary system, which is incredibly fascinating. But we'd like to just stay on track, really, with what's going on. Have you got any debts, George, or anything you'd like to talk about as far as this financial collapse and looting operation, for want of a better word, is going on?
Well, I did actually have a situation recently where I received a letter out of the blue that said that I owed £170 to a debt collection agency. And as it turned out, basically, a year ago, I'd allegedly parked on a taxi rank. Now, the letter at the time would have been sent to my old address when I was living down south. And so anyway, they hadn't updated my details in the course of a year, and all the letters that had been sent out in that time frame, they had not checked, as they should have done when each letter was sent out, to see whether my address was still the same. And so they'd only checked after a year of sending out letters when the debt had been upped about 3 or 4 times. And that's ludicrous. But to be honest, I did wrong. I actually paid the debt, but that was just literally to relieve myself of the stress of the nasty letters.
Well, hopefully after today's show, you won't get stressed out about debt collectors' letters, George.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
right.
occult workings of the court is something I find fascinating. Thanks for your call.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thanks, George. We're going to go to a break very soon, but in summing up, for this part of the show. So we're going into a place of administration which is meant to be a temple and everything's been turned around against us. We're going to try and get some solutions. John's offered solutions, David has, and Alan's about to.
Well, I think the important thing for me after going through this, and it is very complicated, and it's meant to be very complicated. The law doesn't want you to understand the law. It's to really try and simplify it, because, you know, as you know, I'm a pilot. We're lost, and it's a navigational problem. We need to see where we started from to see how we've arrived where we are now.
It's very important to realise that point, because once we realise how we're being used by the system and the way the system is set up, then we are in a position to do something about it. If we're blind to that, we have fear, and fear is what keeps us all in a very lower vibrational state, and that's not where we want to be. We're going to a break. This is Windows on the World. Thank you very much. Call back. Welcome back. Our next guests on the show have been bringing truth to the people of Kent since 2010. Their well-attended talks cover a wide variety of subjects which are often kept out of the mainstream, including the subjects covered on today's show. They are Debbie and Eddie from the Kent Freedom Movement. Debbie and Eddie, welcome to Windows on the World.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. How did the Kent Freedom Movement come about?
All right, go on.
Well, it's a long story, but I will I'll try and make it a bit brief. I work for a company, and one of my colleagues, we used to get chatting, and it turned out that we was both looking into this, you know, truth movement, and we looked into 9/11, etc. We started attending meetings, and then we started going out to the general public, giving out leaflets. And he had I know it sounds a bit sort of new agey, but he had this dream that he was talking in front of an audience where he used to live, and he was saying that he was talking about David Icke, and everyone was listening to him. And I said, it's strange enough, I was sort of translating his dream, and I said, you know what that means? I said, we have to get a meeting in Kent.
We have to have a meeting in Kent.
So people will listen to us,
yeah.
You know. So we didn't think any more of it, and then all of a sudden he said, I've printed out 500 leaflets and I've arranged a meeting in a pub in Gravesend, Rochester. So we got together, and I invited partner Eddie to come out leafleting with us, and that was that night you set up the website, didn't you?
Yeah, I made basically it's about 6 in the morning. I kind of created the Kent Freedom Movement website. We've got a Facebook presence. So basically, we set up a good website with we have a load, like you were saying about the talks. We've had your good self on there. We've had John on there. Alan's a regular. So we just started to do talks, like you say, about the subjects. Yeah. Well, until the people's voice come along, that people ain't touching.
I think this is a very important point to viewers out there, that to lose this feeling of disempowerment, get together with people, start up a group, even if it's in a pub, and you'll find the common ground that people have, and you get guest speakers in. And the sort of wide topics you have, it's great. You know, you cover lots of different things, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, just for instance, our last speaker, I think you might be getting in touch with Neil Haig, who does his art show. We had Gavin Kearney, and it was called The State of the Art and the Death of Cool. And that was all about, again, everything in our society has been degraded and degenerated. Yeah. And, it was quite a fascinating talk. He goes from high art all down to the American prison industrial military complex. Yeah. And at the same time, like you say, we've had quite, some success with a lot of the legal talks. Yeah. People are very like that. They're very popular. Your talk from the Land of the Free was a very popular one.
Corbyn.
We had Piers Corbyn talking about weather. He's an astrophysicist.
I think that's a very important point, that all this stuff is incredibly interlinked. Once you start researching, you find out that most things that we alternative researchers, for want of a better word, which are now becoming mainstream, thanks to the People's Voice, are really interlinked. I mean, and a lot of it ties into Agenda 21, sustainable development, which all local councils in this country have signed up for and are implementing. And what people need to do is get together in their communities and start looking at this stuff, and forming a group like the Kent Freedom Movement is definitely the way forward, because we've had tremendous successes, just the people in this room here, by supporting each other, going into court, researching, sharing research and information. And it's amazing what can happen, isn't it, Eddie?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like you say, that it's strange you should... Everything that these gentlemen have been talking about today, we've tried to address in one way or another. You know, the law's a big issue and that, but this Wednesday, for instance, we've got, speaking to John earlier, we've got a gentleman from Mike O'Keefe from Positive Money, and, you know, John was saying there's slight issues, but we just... The monetary system's such a fundamental to all this.
The monetary system is fundamental to it, and it's the basis of what's going on. We've got a mystery caller from the Midlands. A mystery caller from the Midlands. Are you there, mystery caller from the Midlands?
Yeah, not too much of a mystery, but I'll explain why that is. I'm a solicitor, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm not going to give my real name on air because I'm regulated by the Law Society.
Okay.
But what I have discovered over the last 3 weeks...
Yes.
In listening to the people's voice, doing a lot of research, what you guys are saying is absolutely right. It's absolutely right. I was a member of Knights Temple, yeah? I've seen how the system is being regulated, and I have looked and researched a lot of what you're putting out, and when you go back to... There's a load of stuff that I didn't even know when I've been in the system.
I think this is the point.
I didn't know that the Ministry of Justice is a limited company.
Yeah, that's right. And it's got a CCJ against it.
Yeah. You know, these are things...
The Ministry of Justice has a county court judgment against it. Yeah.
And I can understand the bad vibes that you sort of people on the panel are giving up against solicitors. Solicitors...
Oh, no, we're not against people in the legal profession, not at all. No.
Yeah, they've been programmed not to uphold the law, but advise on the system. That's all they've been allowed to do. Yeah, there's a lot of solicitors that genuinely, honestly believe in what they're doing. Yeah, because they haven't opened their eyes and seen the bigger picture.
I think you can say that about, you know, so many professions, though, can't you? I mean, on the whole thing, we're all kept in little compartments, and especially in the legal profession, because, yeah, you're right, most solicitors do think they're doing a good job.
Yeah, but all they're doing, they're just enslaved to the system. Yeah.
So what would you say, mystery caller?
Open your eyes and look at it.
Yeah.
It's just a form of social control. The whole thing is corporate Britain, even the United Kingdom, which I didn't know until last week. The United Kingdom is United Kingdom PLC.
Correct. It has to be a corporation. We cannot exist unless we are in commerce. We have to be put into commerce. For instance, that's why you need a driving licence, because driving is commerce. You wouldn't need a driving licence to travel, because travelling is a common law right.
There are things which, you know, I've emailed Sonia... Is it Sonia Payton? About sort of coming on the show and stuff, and they've sort of been talking to me about it, which I can't do just yet, but I will do in the fullness of time, I assure you, that there's things within the freedom of the land and all these movements that you're getting slightly wrong.
Yes.
Yeah? It's like
I think we'd all agree with that.
The court incidents in Wales. Yeah, where the police officer said, I'm going to speak, you have to take it up with the Law Society.
Yeah.
All the Law Society is a trade union for solicitors.
Yes.
It's got no help.
Yeah.
People think
and they protect the interests of solicitors. They don't protect the interests of the public.
That is a complete cul-de-sac that you sort of trying to look down, because that's nothing. The solicitors are regulated by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. Yeah, that's the actual nuts and bolts.
They're about on the same level as the IPCC, in my opinion.
Pardon?
They're on about the same level as the IPCC, in my opinion, as independence goes.
Solicitors Regulatory Authority. Yeah. What they basically have done is, over the last 3 or 4 years, is regulate. Yeah? From when I went into the profession, sort of 20 years ago, to what it is now, is a completely different place. Yeah? So much so that I'm just thinking, stuff it. Yeah? Absolutely stuff it, because there is not... What I set out to do and what I believed I was doing isn't what I'm doing now. Yeah? And your show and the People's Voice has awakened me to that. Yeah? So I'm very, very grateful. But what you're saying, yeah, has got a lot of credibility. absolute lot of credibility, because it's free. You know, I was a Freemason when I was 23. Yeah. I look back now. I was in Knights Templar from sort of about the age of 30. What you're saying is right. Did you know that the reason that a judge wears red is because it's ecclesiastical robes from the 17th century?
This is what I found so fascinating. This fascinates me more than anything, is the occult nature of it all and the setup by the Templars. Of course, they were the poor knights of the money temple, not really the poor knights of Christ, because Christ threw the money lenders out of the temple.
Yeah.
Right?
Listen, I don't want to hog up all of your time. I'll leave my telephone number with the producer, yeah, and you can give me a call after the show.
That would be fantastic. I'd love to talk to you. Please do that.
Okay, so I'll do that if you pass me back, because I'm hogging up too much time. But I'm
No, it's great to talk to you.
Okay, you take care now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye. So that's great, isn't it? We've now got members of the legal profession agreeing with us. Well, it's great. It ties in quite nicely, actually, doesn't it, David? Because
it was interesting.
Sorry.
I'd just like to clarify, when I said solicitors are useless, I don't mean any disrespect to anyone who's studied law or any solicitor. What I mean is their hands are tied in certain ways, and I wanted to speak to him while he was on just to get him to confirm that a solicitor's first duty is to the court, as an officer of the court. His second duty is to the public. His third duty is to his client, who is, as we know, an imbecile who can't manage his own business.
Well, it's really the duty has to be to the temple bar.
Well, absolutely.
Private bar guild.
Absolutely, yeah.
The temple bar, which is a private institution and a private club, basically.
But no, solicitors are very useful. I mean, if you need your affidavit,
solicitors are great. Solicitors are great if you're in controversy with a bailiff or debt collector, because you can cost them an absolute fortune if they have a solicitor.
They have to be very, very careful when dealing with unrepresented members of the public, and you can run up their costs exponentially by representing yourself and saying to them, no, I am a member of the public.
Yes. I
represent myself.
And you can just send every single point. Can you please clarify this point? It's going to cost your client £160. There you go. It's just running up the bill for the other side.
Absolutely,
and that's really what it's about.
Especially if it's a corporation.
Controversy is all about money. Yeah.
Run up. This is another remedy you can use. Run up their costs. Don't run to a solicitor. You just study the law. Now you've got the internet. You can look up the whatever financial or instrument they're using against you, and it will act of Parliament. Rip it to shreds. Ask them to prove their point. Show me where you paid the money out. That's a very, very fun.
Where did the books balance?
Show me where you paid the money out. It's the same with all these debt collection companies. They haven't paid the money out. No. Okay.
That's right.
They're trying to claim money. And the other caller before that said that he'd had a £170 parking which he'd settled, and he wasn't served. That's a favourite trick. The CSA wrote to an address that didn't exist for 20 years, in my case, and the barrister stood up in court and said, that's good service. And this is going on, and it's a favourite trick. They just get the debt issued, they don't let you defend yourself, they write to a bogus address, or address they know you're not at, and then they put you through the administrative process, and bam, you're in it. You've got your estate is administered. That's why it's called an administrative process. That's right. Administrative court, administrative law. They are administering your estate.
They're acting as a minister.
Because yes, absolutely. So, again, it goes back to the church, but they are administering your estate for you because you're incompetent to do so.
Exactly. That's a very important point.
Get competent.
You're classed as an imbecile. And this is why you have to have legal representation. But if you represent yourself and administer your estate, as we would suggest people do in these lower matters of debt, then you become a different person in that court. You become basically you become somebody who is in charge of their own affairs and can administer their estate. It takes a little bit of learning, but we're all lay people and we've done this, haven't we? So, John, your website, Get Out of Debt Free, gets an enormous amount of hits, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're getting, well, funnily, we actually got a new website, a brand new design website up yesterday. So I spent a sort of 10, 12-hour day yesterday actually trying to sort that out. So and it's still got a few bugs. So apologies to anyone that's can't get a link to work or anything. Just get in contact. But we're getting about between 3 and on good days we'll get 7,000 individual hits. That's individual people hitting the site a day. So
and I think the one thing we should make clear to everyone is that there's no template remedies. Remedies have to come from yourself. If you issue a template letter from a website and you don't understand it, you've got to be very careful, because you have to have an understanding of the process that you're about to embark on. And if you don't understand that process, then you can come unstuck. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah, I think that's quite true. I think what's more important is that you get through a barrier that I went through, and I'm sure everyone here has been through, where up until that point, and you can tell where people are, because if you don't understand, or let's say comprehend, because I'm not talking legalese, if you don't comprehend the whole system, you can then be in fear. But as soon as you start comprehending what the system is all about, you move out of fear.
Absolutely.
The
An
fear
end to
goes,
fear is what we want.
That's when you stand
We're going
in
to
your
go to
power.
a break. This is what we want to get to people out there, that you have to end the fear. We're going to be back after the break. This is Windows on the World. Please phone in 0207 0207 0203. I can't see it on the camera. I'd had a late night. 0203 714 2700. See you after the break. Okay, welcome back to Windows on the World. We'd like you to phone in this last portion of the show. It's 0203 714 2700. Before we went to break, we were talking about statutory declarations and service of documents. Can you just expand a bit on that, Pete, for us, please?
Yeah,
David, sorry, David. Yeah.
Sorry, we were talking about service of documents. Now, one of your callers said that he hadn't received it. If you generally haven't received it, then you can put in a statutory declaration that you didn't receive it. Okay, and that will void the order. Again, straight back to the void ab initio, void from the outset. That's what it means.
Yes.
You void the order. I think it's in the Courts Act. I'm not sure, but it definitely works.
Yeah,
definitely works.
We've had a lot of success with statutory declarations, and all it costs is £5. You go to a solicitor, or you can get it done in a court, and it's £5, and it's your statement of truth. It works like an affidavit. And if you ever have to fill in forms which are entrapment, which a lot of documentation is, especially from councils and the police and other government bodies, then you don't have to fill in their paperwork if you supply the information yourself, and that's incredibly important, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So getting back to Debbie and Eddie, the Kent Freedom Movement. So what have you actually learned? Your learning curve on this must have been massive since you started putting these talks on.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, thanks to people like yourself, because you've done a talk for us, John has, and we've had a lot of people, doing legal things. But like you say, it's kind of been a learning curve for everyone, thanks to David Icke. I've been reading his books since 1997. So, once you collate all this information, we wanted to do something for it. So we started having talks, and we hope that other people in other counties have a kind of Kent Freedom Movement, so that there's these groups that can support each other. A lot of people come to our meetings and they used to say, I thought I was all alone, and people don't get me in my street, my area, down the pub. Whereas all of a sudden you've got 50 to 100 people, they're all of a like mind. So it's been a great learning curve. And then we've kind of tried to build a community as well.
Well, I think that's the great thing about your site, the Kent Freedom Movement, because it's interactive. So people are on there exchanging information all the time. And this is really, but the part of the divide and rule and the few controlling the many is all about the fact that we all isolate ourselves, basically, and we're easily picked off. But if we can help each other out, even the successes that I've had with a few people going into court, for example, a bit of support, you share your information, you start learning, and then you start getting results.
Yeah, well, actually, that's actually what's been happening. We support people in court. We do a few things. We have the website, YouTube channel, blah, but we support people in court. And actually, this Wednesday, We've got our own meeting with Mike O'Keefe from Positive Money. That's at the Dartford Social Club this Wednesday at 8 o'clock. But we have him. But before that, we're going to the High Court. There's a gentleman, they may have seen him. He's a scrap metal dealer, and his video on YouTube got quite a few hits. And to cut a long story short, the whole process, what you're saying, the administrative process when we went to court was just a farce. So they threw the whole case out of court, and now I think thanks to Tony Blair, since 2005, they've decided to restate the case, which means they've scrapped the previous ruling in the magistrates' court, and they're now going to try to restate the case. Now that's going to happen this Wednesday again. This will be in the morning, and I want to talk to you about that after, Mark, because I think you're doing something on that for the People's Voice. Yeah. And we're going to go there on a Wednesday morning. So if anybody visits the website Kent Freedom Movement,
this was a particular Kent Freedom Movement website. Yeah.
If they build that, it's on the events page. We've actually, because sometimes you're very busy, we've got both events on the day.
This is a very interesting case, though, Eddie.
Yes, brilliant.
Because the British Transport Police forcefully broke into this guy's premises, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And actually, Axel Grind, he said he doesn't consent to this because there was this kind of, anomaly in law, and they basically just grinded and dragged him through the window. And so I don't want to say too much about the case because I don't want to prejudice it, and that's going to come up. But I've been in contact with them, and I've told them about your show and the People's Voice. So I'll talk to you about that after the show.
It brings us on to quite an interesting topic here with the privatisation of police. For instance, there's a Freedom of Information request which asks whether British Transport Police accept funding from any private organisations. And the Freedom of Information request goes on to say, no, British Transport Police are funded by the railway companies. This is the kind of doublespeak we get everywhere. It's like when I wrote to Northampton Bulk Centre asking if it was a court because they process parking tickets and fines. And they said the council has ordered this matter go to court. County Court Bulk Centre at Northampton is a registration point for unpaid penalty fares. Again, doublespeak. We find this all the time. And just like if Eddie, have you come across this? This complete obfuscation of the truth in public office that people seem to have now.
Yeah, well, like we said, we are not getting due process of law. There is no due process. Yeah. I think it's been spoken about today. There is no process, and everything's switched around now. Everything's so complicated. We've got hundreds of millions of laws. It's all, they're speaking in legalese, which is a foreign language. I mean, that in itself is, to my mind, a deception. They're not actually speaking in common law English. So the whole thing is just a double process, and it's all just a money extraction. That's all it is. That's all they want is money out of us now. There's no honour and there's no law, and that's what we want. We want the rule of law.
Absolutely. The rule of law has been degraded. We live under a corporatocracy, really, I would describe it as. It's corporations run everything. They're about to be running the police. We've got Serco and G4. For instance, if you get taken into custody, your lawyer will be appointed by Serco. G4 or Serco will drive you to their prison, and they will also be looking after you with their security while you're in their court. It's totally corporate, and we need to find remedies. The remedies that we've discussed today, I hope, have helped people. If we're in the last part of the show, but please phone in. It's 0203 714 2700. And basically, I was just having a bit of trouble with my earpiece here. Which is minor, very minor thing today, ladies and gentlemen, because we were on air late, which wasn't our fault. Please support the People's Voice. As David Icke's been saying, we are going to run out of money without your support. So remember that you are actually paying for that TV licence if you've got a TV, or if you've not got a TV and you're not paying for the TV licence. Remember that the TV licence costs about £175 a year. For as little as £1 a month, the People's Voice may be able to stay on air. So in summing up from our guest today, so David, you've accompanied me into court on one occasion which was very memorable.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was to do with a council document called the Single Person's Discount Validation Form.
Yes.
And can you just tell us a bit about that? Because I can get really complicated here, but just simplify it for us.
Okay, you were sent a document by a data mining company.
Correct.
Claiming to be the council.
Yes, it was.
For the council.
Yes. It had the councillor's signatory
Okay.
The head of revenues and benefits signature.
And obviously there was you weren't happy about that, so you decided not to fill the form in, and they stuck in a fine for not filling it in.
That's right. There was a priori in there.
A priori,
yeah,
a predetermined
for £350.
Predetermined liquidated damages.
Yes.
Within a
civil contract.
A civil contract.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
Okay. You then phoned them 5 times.
Correct.
To tell them that you were single.
Yeah.
Okay. Which they could have at that point.
Yeah.
Adjusted the situation. They made it appear on the form that the form was the only method of claiming the entitlement, which it is an entitlement.
Correct.
Okay, if you're single, you have the entitlement under law.
Yeah.
Okay. What the judge correctly pointed out was that you had notified them, you'd given them a statutory declaration, which they've ignored. There's the fraud, because they're costing you money by not doing their jobs.
We're going to wrap up now.
Yeah, okay.
But basically what happened was I got into the court and the judge asked me if I'd signed one side of the form. I said, yes, sir, as it removes the controversy. In other words, it removed the fraud, and the judge was aware of that. So we do have remedy. I'd like to thank all of our guests today. My earpiece is completely broken down, but the people's voice is going strong. We always have great fun in here. There's a few technical problems which we're hopefully sorting out, and the people's voice will continue with your support. So I'd like to thank everybody who's watched today. Sorry we were late going on air. It was circumstances beyond our control. So this is Mark Windows for Windows on the World saying stay true, stay tuned, and keep watching keep watching those who are watching us, watching the people's voice. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much.